Okay. Okay. Okay, are we looking good? Is that good? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Dafydd, thanks for the very kind introduction. I mean, it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking to people in my home country. I haven't been home for 2.5 years, very homesick. Thanks for that, COVID. So I'm going to talk to you guys about foreign talent in Taiwan, basically the job market. So I'll be touching on things like the working culture, job opportunities, history, these types of things, what you can do. So as opposed to just talking about the market, I'll also be trying to offer some solutions. Okay, so let's take a look at the statistics. So Taiwanese population at this point is about 23 million. The total number of foreigners is close to 800,000. Those statistics are from 2019. So I think about 800,000. Of those, the government, this is not me saying blue collar, white collar, the government classifies the foreigners here into blue collar, white collar. So about 92% of all of the foreigners here are blue collar. Most of them will be working in factories and as home help. The majority are Indonesian and Filipino, some Vietnamese, some Burmese, but mostly Southeast Asian, and then 65,000 white collar. So the stereotype of the working world in Taiwan is that most people are English teachers, and I think that almost rings true when you look at the statistics. I mean, there's about 5,000 working in education, the majority of which are cram school teachers, which we call bushi bans here. So there's a lot of private companies that do these kind of after school tutoring programs. That's the most common job here for sure. If you go and meet foreigners, the 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 chances that they're going to be working in a bushi ban, one of these cram schools. There's also engineers, some people in hospitality, some people in arts, and then the 3,118 directors of foreign businesses. These will be the C-level guys, the really senior people who were sent over here to work. Okay, I mean, Dafydd gave me a pretty nice introduction, but like he said, I've been a headhunter here for a long time. I actually came here as an English teacher and then was able to transition. My general focus is sales and marketing jobs. So I do a lot of senior level commercial stuff. And to be honest with you, almost all of my candidates are Taiwanese, for market reasons and for legal reasons. It's harder in Taiwan to recruit foreigners because of various regulations here. So almost all my candidates are kind of senior level Taiwanese, although I do speak about the job market for foreign talent as well. I've written a couple of articles about it, and I've been invited to speak at things like this quite a few times. I think because I'm a foreign headhunter, and I think I'm the only foreign headhunter in Taiwan, I have a lot of people contact me and ask for advice. Okay, so let's just get this out of the way first. So, in the 80s and 90s, the idea of the expat contract. So these are expats who are sent to work in foreign places like South America or Asia or Africa, for example. So these type of expat contracts, the company will pay for your housing, for your flights home. They will buy a car or rent a car for you. There's various kind of allowances like mobile and food and things like that. And there's usually quite high salaries. So these types of contracts these days are a lot less common everywhere. And in Taiwan, they're really reduced, and they're mostly for very senior level people. So people who are sent here to be the country manager of Taiwan or director level. Most of the people that I'm speaking to here, you will be what are known as a local hire, just like I am. So a local hire is somebody who has come into the market, i.e. flown to Taiwan, and then has started to look for a job. So you will not be given housing or car or any of these kind of extra benefits. It's basically just pure salary. Okay, so why is the job market in Taiwan challenging for foreign talent? Okay, so if any of you didn't know this, then unfortunately I'm going to have to break it to you. The job market is really, it's not fantastic for foreigners, especially if you compare it to some other places in Asia like Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai. Bangkok, even Jakarta these days. Vietnam, probably I would include there. The job market for foreigners is not fantastic. So the history of Taiwan, there's been a lack of European colonization, which has meant there's not as much access to things like a history of Western businesses and business people working in the market, like you have in, let's say, Hong Kong or Singapore. Yeah, so that might be one of the reasons. There's a lack of European colonization in the history of Taiwan, which means that the modern market is a lot more localized than some other Asian cities. So another reason, people like foreigners having a lack of experience in the local market, that could be a reason as well. Culture fit. So I'll talk about this a bit more in detail, but culture fit means that, let's say, if you are a loud American, that Taiwanese businesses and Taiwanese employers think that you will not be able to fit into the Taiwanese working culture. So that's another reason. Language, of course. So Singapore and Hong Kong, the reason why they're quite good places to work as an expat or as a recent graduate are because English is the business language there. Whereas in Taiwan, English is still used quite a lot, but it's not the business language. So, everyone in different companies is emailing and speaking, and meetings are all in Chinese. I speak quite fluent Chinese, and I don't think I would be able to do my job if I didn't, basically. So next, salary. So a lot of Taiwanese think that foreigners are more expensive on the whole than Taiwanese. And this could be true because to get the working visa, there's a minimum salary. I think it's 49,000 NT. So it's close to £1,500 a month is the minimum salary that you need to get the visa in the first place. So that's another reason why perhaps the job market's a bit tough here. Visa situation, of course, there is a minimum salary. There's also, you need a bachelor's degree to get a visa here. I think that there's ways around it, but they're difficult. Minimum work experience, again, in China, this is really tough because if you want to get a working visa in China, you have to prove that you have at least 3 years relevant work experience in the job or the industry that you're going into. So as a recent graduate, that's almost impossible. I lived in Shanghai before. The working visa in China is a lot more difficult to get than the one in Taiwan. So ARC is Alien Residence Certificate, and APRC is the permanent version of that. It's nice that they call us aliens, right? Alien Residence, certificate. Thanks, Taiwan. These are the basic visas that you get. The APRC, you used to be able to get permanent residency if you lived here for 5 years. Now it's 3 years, thanks to a very recent government regulation change. The gold card is also a new type of visa that's trying to attack senior level foreign talent. So you have to prove that you're highly skilled in a certain area or that you earned a certain amount of money in your previous job. So for example, I know a lot of people on the gold card are from Switzerland and Germany and California, where salaries are actually quite high, so it's easy to prove. For recent graduates, I don't think gold card's going to be a feasible option. And then entrepreneur visa is another option for people who can apply. So Taiwanese companies hiring foreigners, and then foreign multinationals hiring foreigners. So a lot of foreign companies here, the foreign multinationals like Coca-Cola and Uber and Alibaba and Adidas, these companies in the Taiwan market are almost completely localized, and they do this on purpose because they're just focusing on Taiwan market. So 99%, if not 100% of their workforce here is Taiwanese. And so let's say if you are French, you might think, oh, my best bet in Taiwan is to work for a French company like Pernod Ricard or Air Liquide or Chanel. Is Chanel French? Yeah, I'm sure it is. but actually that's very difficult to do. The more likely option is the one that I put above, Taiwanese companies hiring foreigners. And the reason they do this is because they value the foreigners' insight into, let's say, the European or the American or the EMEA, the kind of Middle Eastern markets. Okay, comparisons to Hong Kong, Shanghai, Singapore, Bangkok, Japan. I kind of touched on that a little bit. Okay, where to start? So a bit of advice for recent graduates or candidates with no experience. I'm not really sure who I'm talking to here, so I'm hoping that this is relevant. If it's not, we can just kind of go through it a bit quicker. Okay, so number one, I've put find the right function and industry as quickly as possible. So I don't want to patronize anyone, but function means things like supply chain, HR, legal, sales, marketing, and industry, I think, is self-explanatory. So the quicker you find the kind of career that you want to work in, the better. It's one of the horrible realities about the working world is that companies will hire you based on your previous experience at every stage of your career. So if you've been working in the food industry, but actually you want to switch into the tech industry, even if you have only 2 years experience, HR are very reluctant to give you the job. It's very difficult to switch function and it's very difficult to switch industry. And the older you get, the harder it is to do. It's very difficult to do. So you have to kind of find the right function, find the right industry as quickly as you can. And if you make a bad move, you got to try and figure out how to rectify that because it's like I said, it's not easy to jump function or industry. Okay, the second point is exactly what I just went over. Know that the first couple of job decisions might decide your entire career. Like the analogy I always use is about the river. Like once you're in that river, there's no going back. It's going to take you down wherever that river is going. Put your head down, graft and grit are still very important. This is especially true when you're young. I think when you first start in the working world, you have to kind of put in the hard yards. Like I don't know if anyone's watched the TV show Suits, for example. Like in the law industry, in the legal industry, in an investment banking industry, that's the stereotype, right? You come in young and you work really, really, really hard so that you can kind of climb the ladder and then relax a little bit. Find a work-life balance that makes you feel like you're achieving something. So this is kind of relevant to Taiwan because Taiwan, I think, has the second most working hours in the world. I think Korea's number one and Taiwan's number two. So Taiwanese working culture is not focused on work-life balance. People here they work overtime every day. I mean, you guys will know the advertising company Ogilvy, for example. Ogilvy is a good example because most people in that company will work until midnight every day, right? They start at 9 and they finish at midnight every single day. And that's very normal in Taiwan, unfortunately. Learn new skills, but in an organized way. So again, that goes back to the first point. It's good to learn different functions and it's good to try a couple of different industries if you can, but the more you flit around, the harder it's going to be to get jobs that you want or get jobs in a specific industry. Okay, be ambitious but also realistic. This point is something that I encounter with young people quite a lot. They will say things to me like, oh, I'm interested in Tesla, Airbnb, Amazon, these kind of big, sexy companies, the kind of 10 out of 10 companies. They're really interested in working for those types of jobs. And those companies are so difficult to get into, right? And in reality, you will probably need a stepping stone or two to get into those types of companies. So, for example, it can be very difficult to get hired by Google as a recent graduate. But maybe if you work for another type of software company or another type of tech company, maybe a tier down, a tier B type company, If you work there for 3 years, then maybe you can get into Google. Yeah. Speak to people who know the market, but take negativity with a pinch of salt. So when I was applying for university, a lot of my mum and dad's friends are lawyers, and they all told me not to go into law. And then I've got my mum and dad have a few friends who are professors, and they told me not to go into academia. And it was like everybody I spoke to told me not to go into their specific industry, which is what I'm saying. Take negativity with a pinch of salt. As a headhunter, I listen to people complain about their jobs all the time. So just know that it's part and parcel of the working world. Internships and extra additions to your CV are always good. So especially as a recent graduate, you have basically no work experience. So what you want people like me and HR to focus on are things like academic performance, which I hope is good. If you're in SOAS, then I would hope so. And the extras, the school choir tour, the internships, played for a semi-professional football team. All these little extras are always good. Yeah, always good. So soft skills are just important as hard skills. You'll learn this more as you go on, but hard skills will get you a job interview, and then soft skills will get you a job. The people who interview best are the ones who are high in soft skills. So they make good eye contact, they're well dressed, they are funny, they're likable, and they're relatable. They can talk about different topics. They're not super nervous. So you got to really think about that soft skill part when you're applying for jobs and on the job market. It's really important. And then the last one, don't quit a job before 1 year. So in the HR industry, we call this being jumpy. So being jumpy, I know that's a made up word. Being jumpy in our industry means that you change jobs too often, which we will label you as unreliable if this is the case. So be very aware about that. Okay, so in the Taiwan job market, there's different things that you can do to make life easier for yourself. Learning Chinese. I know Dafydd said that you're going to have a talk about kind of language programs in Taiwan. There's a lot of good ones. The famous one is NTU Shida. But there are language intensive programs all over the island in different universities. The one thing that I would maybe warn you about is that a lot of those programs focus on reading and writing. And I might be a little bit biased, but I don't think that that is important, especially in the digital age with Google Translate. And I just don't think you need to spend as much time as it takes to learn Mandarin reading and writing. That's just a personal opinion. I think that focusing on speaking and listening is much more important. So those kind of private language centers, you can hire a private teacher. I think I pay 750 an hour. So that's, probably about £20. Am I right saying that? Yeah. Yeah, so I pay for lessons every week with a private teacher. You can also do the language exchange, which is free, where you will teach somebody your native language and they will teach you Chinese. These are quite common, especially for younger people. And networking is super important. Super, super, super important. I don't know how many of you know the concept of guanxi. So guanxi in Taiwan and China and Malaysia, these kind of Chinese speaking areas, guanxi is to do with relationships, and business works here based on guanxi a lot of the time. A lot of foreigners can get frustrated in the Taiwan market because they think good product means it will sell, or I can help your business, so why would you not use my service? Whereas actually business is more relationship dominated. So in a B2B relationship, this person will use your service because they like you, they have a relationship with you. So you got to think about that. It's a really unique part of the culture. Improving your CV is fairly self-explanatory. That's what I was talking about with the internships and the extra bits and when Dafydd gave his introduction to me, he said, "Oh, and Alan was also a model and a composer." These are the extra things that I have done. Like I did TV commercials. I play in a band. I played quite high level tennis. Um, yeah, I don't know. The extras, the added extras are always interesting. They kind of make your CV stand out a bit. Studying here instead of working. This can be a good idea if you want to eventually work here. You can maybe come here as a student because there's a lot of scholarships available, or studying Chinese. And then once you're here, you can do the networking and find yourself internships and job possibilities. Looking and dressing professionally, outward image. Maybe I think these days in the UK and Canada and America and Australia, the more kind of Western democratic countries, you can have a crazy haircut or a crazy hair color or dreadlocks or a tattoo on your neck or lots of jewelry or lots of piercings. I think that that's becoming more and more acceptable in the West. Probably not so much in Asia. Asia is still 20 years behind. So let's say if you have dreadlocks and you want to come to work in Taiwan, or you have bright pink hair and you want to come and work in Taiwan, I don't want to tell you not to do that, but you are making things difficult for yourself, right? Like when I first started in the job market here, when I went from English teacher to headhunter, I had a lot of festival bracelets that I used to wear, and I used to have an ear piercing here, and I got rid of that stuff. I was like, okay, and I bought some nice suits. Yeah. Direct applications means basically instead of just applying online, it means you go straight to the company and maybe ask the country manager or ask the HR directly. That's what I mean by that. Creating your own business, freelancing, remote work. This is something that a lot of people do in Taiwan because the job market is so hard. So because it's so difficult for companies to give you an opportunity, a lot of people will just do their own thing, whether that be freelancing or remote work means you live in Taiwan, but actually you're working for an American or a British company. These kind of things are easier in certain industries, like, for example, software engineers or journalists find remote work a lot easier. Internship companies like Pagoda Projects. So Pagoda Projects, you should take a note of this. It's one of those companies that make you pay for your own internship, which I can understand some people might be wincing at. But basically, Pagoda Projects will help you find a company, find an internship. They'll set up interviews for you. The guy who runs Pagoda Projects is a personal friend of mine, Danny. He's a really good guy, really nice guy. So if you're looking to come to Taiwan and you're young, Pagoda Projects is probably the easiest way to do it. Okay, job hunting strategies. Perseverance and creativity, like I said, it's not easy, so keep going. Creativity means thinking outside the box. How do you leverage your network? How do you do something other than just apply online? That's what I mean. Dealing with rejection and disappointment. You have to understand that working in your native country is the easiest way to climb the career ladder. If you have chosen to come and work in Japan or Malaysia or Taiwan, in this example, you're making it difficult for yourself already. So you have to understand that off out the gate, basically. So it's going to be tough. Using headhunters and recruiters. So I put a question mark there because number one, headhunters in Taiwan don't really deal with any junior level, and no one here will specialize in foreign talent. So the reason I put a question mark there is because unfortunately we're not going to be too helpful. Maybe in 5 years' time. Most headhunters will focus on mid to senior level, which means kind of already at manager 5, 6, 8 years in. So number one, applied for jobs on LinkedIn and 104.com.tw. Elingsu 104 is the website that most Taiwanese will use to find jobs. Unfortunately, it's still all in Chinese, although I think they might be creating an English version. But LinkedIn and 104 are the places to search for jobs and to put your resume. Use your current network to its fullest. So if you have connections from your high school or your mum and dad's friends or somebody that you met in a hotel 5 years ago who you know lives in Taiwan, use all those people. Like, you have to be a bit shameless sometimes to find a job. You have to ask for favors, and don't be afraid to do that. You know, people are usually quite willing to help if they can. Number 3, taking the time to build a new network of contacts through LinkedIn and events. So I use LinkedIn every day. I think I've got 25,000 connections. I hate people who think of LinkedIn like Facebook. LinkedIn is not for adding your actual, in-person friends. LinkedIn is a business platform. You can add whoever you want, right? So don't be afraid to do that. If you want to work in Taiwan and you want to work for a company like ASUS, add everyone in ASUS and start messaging them. Don't be afraid to do that. Number 4, spent the time to craft an attractive resume and LinkedIn profile. If you want to see what I consider to be a good LinkedIn profile, then maybe visit mine, because obviously I spend so much time there that I do regard my own LinkedIn profile as quite strong. So if you want to see an example of what I think is a strong LinkedIn profile, just search my name, Alan McIvor. A strong CV. We don't really have time to talk about what a good CV is, but you can probably find examples online. I would go for a 2-pager. If you're super young, a 1-pager is okay. But that kind of the American, like, oh, if Elon Musk can do 1 page, then so can you. I don't buy that at all. 2-3 pages for somebody with a bit of experience is better, because it gives more information about what you've actually done in your job. Number 5, research which companies hire foreigners. So this is something, if you're falling asleep listening to me talk, this is something to focus on, okay? It's a lot easier in Taiwan to get hired by companies that already have a history of hiring foreigners. You got to think about that. If you are the first foreigner in that company, life is going to be really tough for you. And a lot of the times the HR will have no idea how to process your visa. So I say she, HR in Taiwan's 80% female. So he or she might just reject your profile because they don't even want to process the visa. And I have heard of that happening. So if you apply for a company that already hires foreigners, it's going to be 10 times easier. Okay, specific industries and roles. Startup market and foreign-owned SME means small to medium enterprise. So this is the best place for foreigners to find a job, the startup market. The reason I say that is because the startup companies here, they don't offer as much money, but they're much more kind of young and cool, and you can work from home, and everyone, all hands on deck, and they're much more westernized and less traditional. So startup market, and then foreign-owned SMEs, which means those businesses owned by foreigners in Taiwan. They might not be they're not obvious companies, but those are the best places to work. Like, I have a client called Acaretta that's owned by an Indian friend of mine. And then Creator DB is owned by a kind of a really young Jewish guy from Chicago. He's a genius, basically. Those are foreign-owned companies in Taiwan, and those are the best places to work for foreigners, culture-wise. Number 2, hardware. So hardware is what Taiwan is good at. So by hardware, I mean things like computers, memory chips, peripherals. Peripherals are things like keyboards, mouse, webcams, all that kind of computer. Even peripherals, I would say, like charging things for iPhones and like iPhone cases. This is a Taiwanese company that makes this iPhone case. So hardware is the best. Hardware is the biggest employer of foreigners, because they're Taiwanese companies, but they target the international market. So they need to hire a lot of foreigners for sales and marketing. Okay. That's the next thing I was going to say. Taiwanese companies selling into the international market. These are the best places for foreigners to work, because let's say if you are German, then a Taiwanese company will hire you to sell and do marketing into the German market. Or if you are a Spanish speaker, they might hire you to cover the South American market, for example. So sales, marketing, e-commerce, editing, copywriting, digital, social media. These are all really common areas for foreigners to work. Engineering, I don't know if any of you will be engineers. And so as the courses that you're studying, I'm not too sure. But engineering, no. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah. No, engineers are weirdos. Oh no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. So software, hardware, semiconductor industries have a lot of engineers there. Internet and app is another one for the same reason as the startup market. The internet and app industries here are kind of younger and cooler and more Western and, better communication styles and things like that. Education industry and edutech. So these kind of like learn English apps and stuff like that. These places hire foreigners. Hospitality used to, but obviously COVID has wrecked that industry. It's really sad, actually. Like I used to do a lot of business with Agoda and Expedia and stuff, and those companies are not doing well for very obvious reasons. Part-time project-based work. So this means if you can work part-time for a company here and you are cheap and you can prove yourself, then the company has a much higher chance of hiring you. That's why I kind of recommended the internship pagoda project thing, because it is so much easier to come in as a cheap intern. And I mean cheap from the perspective of the company. They see you as cheap and then get hired full-time after that. You got to really get your foot in the door. Once you get your foot in the door, things will open up. But the foot in the door is the hardest thing to do. Okay, different cities. Taipei, Taoyuan, Hsinchu, Taichung, Kaohsiung. There's a lot of fantastic places to live in Taiwan. But for foreigners looking for non-teaching jobs, you kind of have to be in Taipei. There are options, like, for example, Hsinchu has a lot of semiconductor industry companies. Taoyuan has a lot of manufacturing companies. Taichung, weirdly, is really strong in the bicycle industry. I don't know how many of you knew this, but Taichung is like the bicycle making capital of the world, which is really interesting. And then Kaohsiung is tough. I'm not gonna lie. There's gonna be almost no opportunities for foreigners there outside of English teaching. Okay, I've written here the most difficult options. So I don't know the group that I'm speaking to, but if any of you are wanting to come to Taiwan and your function, what you want to work in, is any one of these that I just listed, then you're making things really difficult for yourself. So HR function, and I don't mean what I do. The kind of recruitment is possible, but HR function is really difficult because there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of Taiwan local regulation stuff that you will need to do to work in that function. And so it's very rare to see foreign HR here. The only guy I can really think about is a guy called Dave, and he's a white guy, but he was born here. He's lived here for like 45 years. So he presents as a white American, but actually he's a white Taiwanese guy. He's an HR in a company here called Nuva. Legal, for kind of obvious reasons. Government relations is a tough one to work in because if you're dealing with a very local Taiwan government, they're not going to hire foreigners, and they're especially not going to hire young foreigners. Strategy and policy, I'm sure that's going to be kind of suck for you guys to hear because I know it's SOAS. I think that's one of the things that you would be kind of focused on maybe. That's going to be it's going to be much easier for you to get a job in strategy and policy in London than it is in Taipei. I can tell you that. Sustainability. The reason I say that is because, like I said, Taiwan's maybe 20 years behind the West in terms of valuing that kind of sustainable businessy type thing. It's very fashionable in the West, but it's not here. The only exception being maybe the wind energy industry, which is really hot here. And then top tier MNCs. So if anyone thinks that they can come to Taiwan and work for L'Oreal and Coca-Cola and Procter and Gamble and Nike and Apple, I would, yeah, it's going to be really, 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 really tough to do that. Really, really tough to do that, because those kind of companies are very localized and they just will not consider foreign applicants. I mean, even somebody like me who's been in the market for 12 years working with Taiwanese local people, speaks Chinese, they still would not consider somebody like me. They're just not open-minded to that kind of thing. Okay, we're getting close to halfway. I'm just going to do this page quickly, and then let's go into the kind of Q&A session. Keep things interesting. I think I've been monologuing for long enough. Okay, so specific networking. I don't know if you guys want to note this down. All Hands Taiwan is a business networking-y type event for non-teaching foreigners. And this is my favorite. I do a lot of work with All Hands. I've spoken at maybe 6 or 7 of their events, and I go to a lot of them. And I think they're really good people, the founders. And I think that the mission is fantastic. And I think that the community is great. So All Hands Taiwan, they have a Facebook group and a website. I would recommend them. Chambers of Commerce, so AmCham, BritCham, EuroCham, these kind of chambers of commerce are worth looking out for. Taipei Tech Arena, Taipei Startup Stadium, Moxa, these are all startup incubatory type things based in Taipei. Clubhouse. It's still quite big in Taiwan. You can kind of follow Clubhouse, and there's quite a lot of Taiwanese type influencers on that still. Taiwan Impact Entrepreneurs is a Facebook group. Again, good people. Like the guys who run it, Jamie and Andrew. Jamie and Andrew, really good guys. Nice guys. Nice guys. The problem with a lot of the previous non-teaching-y Facebook group stuffs is it would get really toxic. Like somebody would post a job saying, oh, we're looking for an editor, pay 50,000 NT dollars per month. And then there would be a bunch of comments underneath saying things like, oh, 50,000 is nothing. Or, oh, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. These kind of comments. And Taiwan Impact Entrepreneurs are a lot less toxic than that type of thing. It's very supportive and encouraging and nice people. Non-teaching jobs in Taiwan is what I'm referring to with that kind of toxic-y stuff. It's still a good place to look for jobs, but there's a lot of fighting in the comments and that really immature stuff. I hate it. I've been drawn into a couple of those Facebook wars and always regret it. Specific LinkedIn-based networking, I touched on that a little bit. If you're looking for jobs in Taiwan, LinkedIn is your best resource. And then Contact Taiwan are a government program set up to help foreigners find jobs in Taiwanese companies. Although I think that they're quite useless. I don't think it's a good endeavor. I think it's a waste of money. But that's just a personal opinion. Okay, cool. So I'm going to log out here.
Great, fantastic. Thanks for that, Al. I thought that was really fascinating and very practical. I think that I can imagine that some might think that your overview is quite kind of critical or negative in terms of how difficult it is. But I think that that's realistic. I think based on our students' experience and even my own experience, we know that it's a really difficult market. It can be a very rewarding market, as we've seen in your own case. And it also kind of made your comment on Kaohsiung made me think about my own struggles working in Kaohsiung to kind of get out of that that kind of bushy band kind of sector, even with the kind of language skills. So you could do I could do other things, but not that you could kind of actually live off those kind of things.
I mean,
go ahead.
Sorry. I wrote an article about the job market for foreign talent. So if you go to my LinkedIn, you can find it. And I called that article "The Rough with the Smooth," because the rough is the job market's tough, and the smooth is that Taiwan is such a nice place to live. It's an absolute paradise. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. Yeah.
And the first question I wanted to ask before I pass on to the audience and students was about how you managed to do that switch, because you started off as a pretty junior person in Taiwan. You were teaching in language schools, but you were able to make that switch. So what was your kind of secret there? Was it going to Shanghai, or was it?
Yeah, it was honestly, it was brutal. It was one of the hardest periods of my life because, like I said, the first step is the hardest. So I had decided to leave Taiwan and move to Shanghai. And then in Shanghai, I just arrived, found an apartment, and started looking for jobs. And when I say I started looking for jobs, I really did. I applied for hundreds of jobs. I tried to leverage my high school network because I went to boarding school in Canada. So there's a lot of rich kids and a lot of rich Chinese went to the boarding school. So I tried to leverage those connections. I tried to leverage my St. Andrews connections. I even did things like put on a suit and just walked into Nike's office. Yeah. I walked into a record company office and asked for an interview. And in 2 months, I had one job interview. So it was, I mean, I was burning through my savings. It was brutal. It was really, really, really tough. And eventually the job I got in headhunting was not even as a headhunter. It was a personal assistant for the general manager. So when I started from the bottom, I really did. And in terms of salary, she gave me a good salary, but I would have taken anything. I would have taken zero. You know, like that first step, the foot in the door, so tough. Yeah.
And that was critical, but that those couple of years in China for then getting back into Taiwan.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, from there, that first job until now, my career and my salary and my options have been getting better and better. It's like exponential growth. Like these days, I could go to any headhunting company in Taiwan and say, "Hey, I'd like to work for you." And I think almost all of them would say yes. But previously, all of them would have said no, right? So it's the more you do, the kind of more the doors open, kind of thing. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And then let me just open up to students and audience members. I think the mics are open. So if people would like to, you can either type a question and we can read it out, or you can use that raise your hand function if you'd like to speak. Let me just check if we've got anything in the. Okay, yeah, we've got a couple of questions. Manuel, did you want to raise your question?
So recently run into a lot of mercenaries, particularly from Russia, military advisors and submarine builders. Is that an industry on the rise? It's not something that I've come across, the military contractors. Hi, Manuel. Do you want to unmute? You're on mute.
Am I on mute?
I can hear you now.
Am I? No, I'm on mute.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. No, recently I met a lot of people. Maybe you know the submarine program is going on in Kaohsiung for I think 18 years now without any success. So recently we brought in a lot of Russians to somehow finish them as cheap as possible, typical for state-owned companies. And then last time there was a big MCHAM event at the IKEA rooftop in Taichung. There were a lot of contractors from Lockheed Martin and all the BAE and all the big shots in the military industry were building the F-16V5, fifth generation fighter now, and a new factory for missile building, torpedoes and sea mines. And they told me it's going to be a big industrial hub in Taiwan to supply the other Asian countries out of Taiwan.
Yeah, that's interesting. Although the one thing I'd say about that, I bet a lot of those people have been sent.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's a little bit less relevant to people in Taiwan looking for a job, because those types of jobs require, for example, military clearance. Like, you need a certain level of security background checks to work for those types of jobs. And, you know, for somebody like me, those kind of jobs just don't come across my door. I mean, I've spoken to a couple of weaponsy type Lockheed Martin type companies, and they won't use recruiters for security and privacy types of reasons. Yeah, that's interesting to hear.
Okay. Would anyone else like to come in with any questions or comments? B, were you going to come in there? Go ahead.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. It is fascinating what you said, but I would like to just as a supplement, just say tonight, actually, because you talk about a visa, and actually for our students, especially quite a few in the audience, not just studying, but also there's a particular schemes called youth mobility. As long as you're under 30 and you are actually, there are quite a loose visa restrictions. So if you guys are interested, that's another way of getting to know Taiwan. Getting to know the market a little bit, like you know, Alan was saying. Another thing I would like to remind everyone here, in the past few years, because the economy is so bad, and not to mention COVID, for young people to get a job, even the first startup, it's quite difficult. At abroad or at home. So it's not just about difficult to get a job in Taiwan. Another thing I would suggest, think the other way around, is for a foreigner like me, it's also difficult to get a job in your country. So just think about, actually, it is difficult anyway, not to mention as a foreigner to search for a career in a foreign country. There must be other reasons for you want to go abroad. So it's not just because I can't find a job here, so I find a job elsewhere, but also other elements. I'm sure Alan must be because of love as well as a career. So there's in life, the career choice is not just about career itself. For example, like me or David when he was in Taiwan, it's also because you have a particular relationship and you want to stay on. So I just say to all the people in the audience, so I think it's not just about very difficult because I'm a foreigner to find a job. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there's things that are changing as well. I mean, all of the things that I'm talking about are mostly current market situation stuff. So, for example, me saying it's difficult for a foreigner to work in strategy and policy, maybe you can be the first one to open that door. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't do it. I'm just saying at the moment it's a bit more difficult to do that type of thing. Yeah. So absolutely. And yeah, what was just said about, you know, you have to have other reasons to be here. I mean, I live in Taiwan because I want to live in Taiwan. I think it's a wonderful place to live. It's super safe and friendly, and the nature is beautiful here. And yeah, the people are just really warm. And my wife is Taiwanese, and my baby is half Taiwanese, and I have a dog and a car and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, my roots are here on purpose, right?
And yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen a fair few cases of kind of moving to China and then moving back. But I was just going to maybe let me come back to that question a little bit later, because we have an audience question. Elian, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Hi everyone. So
Hi.
Mr. Fell, I'm Eleanor's boyfriend, one of your former students. So she says hi. Mr. McIvor, I want just to ask a question. I've been working in the consulting industry for now 4 years and a half. So I'm a senior consultant at a big four company in Paris. So what? Excuse me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I was wondering if I want to go to Taiwan, would I have to stay in the consulting industry, or is it possible to switch? Because you said it's difficult. So now, as a senior consultant, what do you think? Would it be possible?
That's a good question. I mean, the big four in Taiwan are less focused on strategy consulting and a bit more in that traditional auditing and accounting stuff. So you don't have, in the same way that maybe Deloitte and KPMG and Ernst & Young and PwC, they have, almost McKinsey type consultants in a lot of other cities. In Taiwan, they don't really. So I think basically, yes, you would be able to come to a market like Taipei and transfer into a different industry because the skills that you have learned in a big four strategy firm are very easily translatable, or I should say highly regarded. They would be highly regarded by company owners here, especially for, let's say, like a smaller startup that was looking to hire somebody to be really quite hands-on with the like expanding into new markets and that kind of strategic planning stuff. I think they would look at your profile and think, that's a really high value candidate there. I mean, you have to remember, most companies are hiring you based on IQ and likability, a combination of those two things. So if you come across in an interview as likable and your CV makes you look smart, that's what they're looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see we have a question from Joey about the academic sector. So, and he's asking about the non-native speakers of English lecturers, to what extent they have faced difficulty in gaining employment at university. So with a PhD, if I don't know if you want to comment first on that one, me or ILBU might also. To what extent do you actually get these kind of academic post questions?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot of academics here, and the ones that I do know are English speaking. So yeah, maybe Dafydd, you would be a better place to answer something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it has become an easier market for, in the past, a lot of those working in universities in Taiwan would be in kind of English teaching kind of posts. But I think that has changed. I think the universities are trying to internationalize. And I think one of the key things that they're going to look at is going to be publications, because Taiwanese universities are so kind of publication oriented. So I think that if you do have a strong publications, particularly journal publications profile, then that should be useful for certain departments, and certain departments tend to be more kind of open to international applicants. But that is definitely on the rise. Also, I think the fact that universities are opening more English language courses is also significant. One last word of warning, and this is an impression, something that people are telling me, is that Taiwanese universities are very, very bureaucratic in their application process. And even for Taiwanese based abroad, they often do find the job application process can be quite challenging. I think it's getting better. I don't know whether BU, did you want to respond on Joey's question?
No, just one thing. I think actually Alan touched upon this. That is how much you want to integrate it into that department and that academic environment. I think several of my European friends, although they integrated very well and they can, but you can only integrate it to a certain degree, which means that there's a certain kind of cultural barrier. It's unspoken. That's definitely true. Even with very good language ability, you still seem to feel that you are an outsider. That is not something that you will feel in a more Western context. But I noticed you said you are seriously considering on moving to Thailand. So you have that already, certain potential places to go to, I suppose.
And the other thing I would add to B's point, and it kind of has a link to some of Alan's point, is that the way you kind of network and build up your profile, although the way we do this in an academic sector is quite different, but I think it's really critical that I think in a lot of European academic job reviews, it's much more blind in terms of the background. But I would say in Taiwan universities, I think they need to know you. They need to, often if you've been at conferences, for example, if you take part in conferences, you've published in Taiwanese journals, I think that really does matter. So that profile, I think, is really important, together with the type of publications you've got.
May I also just say that I think they are very welcoming, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
More and more so.
Oh, more and more so. I was going to add that as well. I know for a fact that Taiwanese universities are doing their best to internationalize. So things like making sure, even paying for private English teachers for professors so that they can register that professor as a potential English language class teacher. That's happening more and more.
Okay, great. So would others like to come in with some more questions? If you want to raise your, use the hand raise function.
Do you know, one of the things, we can wait for another question to come up, but one of the things I didn't manage to touch on was the culture aspect of, if you are a foreigner working in a Taiwanese working culture, what are the massive differences that you're going to experience? And what do you need to be aware of as well? Because a lot of the failed careers of foreigners I've seen in Taiwan are foreigners who have come into work in a Taiwanese office and they haven't compromised their personality. So let's say if they're very loud and opinionated and confident, that can really, really clash with the average Taiwanese person who is maybe quieter and more humble and less willing to speak up. So if you are like the kind of chalk and cheese personality in a Taiwanese office, you're probably going to fail. You're probably going to get fired, or colleagues are not going to like you and you won't know why, and you'll feel ostracized because you haven't managed to fit in. These are things that you really need to focus on if you're coming into work in a Taiwanese company. The best advice I had was when you first come in, try and do as much listening as you can, because when you listen in meetings, you can kind of figure out how things are done. How do people speak up in meetings? How do people give opinions? How do people interact with each other in the office? And if you pay a bit more attention to that, rather than coming in all nervous and loud and stuff, it's probably going to be better for you. So it's really something to think about. If you go to my LinkedIn page, I've written another article called How to Have a Long and Successful Career in Taiwan as a Foreigner. And I give 15 numbered pieces of advice that are specific to foreigners working in Taiwan. So if you're interested in that, I think that goes into real detail about the culture nuance differences that you need to be aware of.
Could I just kind of follow up on that? Because I guess listening to your talk, it kind of also made me think about my own time in Taiwan. I was kind of curious if you kind of reflect back on your kind of that first kind of headhunting job that you had in Taiwan after Shanghai. Do you feel you kind of learned from any mistakes in that period? Because it's kind of going back a decade now. I mean, how do you, with any kind of key kind of lessons that you learned from that experience? Because of course that's also going to, I can imagine it will be quite different from the Chinese company environment in Shanghai.
The Chinese company was weird because I was the first foreigner in a company of 200. They had never hired somebody like me. And so I was regarded almost like a tool. Like, we can use this foreign guy for these certain functions. It's like, you know, we can take him to business development meetings with foreign clients because he can speak, you know. So that was interesting because I was just trying to find my way and I was trying to be useful. So I would even teach English to my colleagues on a Friday afternoon because I thought that was valuable and I wanted to be useful, right? I would never do that now. So my first job as a real headhunter back in Taipei was my worst experience because like I said, some of the culture nuancy stuff, I just didn't fit in as much as maybe I do now. I was less aware. I probably annoyed some people. I was maybe a bit too confident, and my Chinese wasn't as good. Yeah. I mean, the other thing about my industry is that it's very female dominated. So almost all of my colleagues were Taiwanese females. So not only am I a foreigner, but I'm also a male. And I don't know if that kind of played any effect. I think it probably did. And also, this is kind of awkward, but my previous company, all of the general managers around Asia were white guys, right? And so I bet you my colleagues, my really senior colleagues, saw me coming in as a 29-year-old and thought, he's going to leapfrog me. I know he is. Like, watch this. I bet he's the next Taiwan country manager, even though I have 15 years more experience than him. And I think that created some resentment, which is understandable, to be honest with you. But it's stuff that I've definitely been able to learn from, and I think my current job is the best one I've had because I feel really quite integrated.
Okay, great. Joey, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks a lot for the piece of advice. I guess I just have one question, although Alan has actually tapped on that earlier about culture. I want to be very specific, particularly on Taiwanese work culture. Which is appreciated more, at least based on your experience? Is it to be more, let's say, assertive? To be a little bit, proactive? Because I'm a Filipino. I'm working now in a Thai university. And I've been trying to do what you did, like observing the nuances, the culture, before I fully, step my foot forward. But how is it in the Taiwanese context?
This answer might seem like a bit like I don't know. I'm just going to say this. So the best way, in my opinion, to act is to try and fit in and also try and use your otherness to your advantage. You have to try and play that ball, because the people that, let's say in your example, if you just try to 100% become Thai and do everything culturally that the Thais do, then, what's the point in doing that? It's almost a bit weird. That's not who you are. That's not your background. I think the reason that I've become successful is because I am still my British Alan, give my opinion, but because I understand Taiwanese working culture, I will do it in a way that doesn't piss people off, right? It's, I will give feedback to colleagues in a way that they probably deem as constructive as opposed to critical. These are the small little nuances that kind of... So the quote I had in one of my articles was, "You want to be considered an insider without losing the advantages of the outsider." Does that make sense? Yeah.
I kind of had a kind of a policy relevant question, because again, you've been in Taiwan now for well into your second decade now.
Yeah.
And Taiwan has been talking about internationalizing its job market and kind of reducing the red tape. And you've touched upon a number of the programs.
Yeah.
But overall, I mean, how much progress do you feel has been made? Is it still, or is it more? Okay, that's one of
no, for sure. For sure. I think, yes, progress has been made. The government gold card has been good, and the government is saying the right things. The kind of the critical point I would have of the Taiwanese government is that they do a lot of, say one thing but don't follow up. So, for example, a lot of these gold card visa holders, and there's probably a few thousand of them, a lot of them arrive here and have no idea about the job market. Like, they don't know how to find a job. They don't know which industries. Like, they would probably want to listen to this talk that I just gave because they have no access to that kind of information. And if I'm honest with you, I think the corporate and private and individuals have been having a much bigger effort than the government have. So, maybe people like me writing articles and people like John and Danny from All Hands Taiwan and people like Jamie and Andrew from Taipei Impact Entrepreneurs, that, this Facebook group has thousands of people in it and they're all supportive and helping each other. Or All Hands Taiwan has now the biggest job what's it called? Job fair, the biggest job fair in Taiwan ever. And this is nothing to do with the government. These are just guys who thought, this is a thing that is missing. Let's pool resources and try and fix the problems. Yeah, so it is changing for the better, for sure. It is changing for the better. Yeah, no doubt.
And if there's one thing that that government could do to make things easier, is there one thing that that would help?
Oh God, I mean, I'm going to give you an answer based on my specific industry. So in Taiwan, there's two types of licenses that you can get to be a headhunter. One of them is for Taiwanese locals and it costs $500,000 NT dollars. And then if you want to help foreigners find jobs, you have to pay 5 million, 10 times the amount. Which is just totally ridiculous. It's one of those examples of, we want to attract high-level foreign talent, gold card people. Oh, but we won't let headhunters help them find jobs. Which I'm sure you can imagine is really frustrating for somebody like me who has 10 foreigners a week message me and say, hey, I'm looking for a job in Taiwan. Can you help out? And legally, I can't because we don't have that 5 million license. Yeah. So I can give advice and I can be friendly and stuff, but I can't do my job because of government regulation. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Taiwan has a lot of these laws where they're old laws that were just never changed. Like, for example, it's illegal for foreigners to teach in kindergartens here, even though thousands do. So, like, let's say somebody reports your kindergarten, the police will raid the kindergarten with video cameras and the foreign teachers have to run into the bathroom and onto the roof and out the back door and hide in the cupboard. I mean, it's like, it's just completely nonsensical, but no one has ever changed the law because, Taiwan is a slow, bureaucratic, small c conservative type of government, type of legislature.
So you've talked quite a lot about LinkedIn as a kind of key tool. I mean, I know it's there's are there any kind of key things that you would say were critical in that LinkedIn design? Okay, apart from the fact you talked about the distinction between it and Facebook. I mean, what do you see as being critically important? Particularly, I mean, you've mentioned you've got something like 25,000.
25,000, yeah.
Which is,
it's a bit ridiculous, right? Yeah, I think my best advice if you're talking about LinkedIn is to be thorough, like really fill things out. So, write in the grades that you got at university and what you studied, and write underneath your jobs, fill in that information about what you did and put in those numbers. So make it kind of look like a CV, like make it thorough. The way that the LinkedIn algorithm works is that the more information you have, the more you're going to be searchable. And then the best piece of advice I would have is add a lot of people and message every single one of them when they connect. Every single one. Even if it is a simple, like, hey, nice to connect, hope you're doing well. Even if it's a simple thing like that. But if you're trying to get a job, you might want to send a small elevator pitch, like, hi, my name's Jenny. I'm looking for jobs in Taiwan. I'm going to move there in March. I've heard SOAS are a great company to work for. Is it okay if I can send you my resume? Those types of message I think are really essential. It's my baby.
We've got a question. Maybelline, did you want to come in? And maybe you might need to give Alan a few seconds to come back.
I'm back.
Yeah, he's back. Okay, Maybelline, over to you.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I thought your talk was really useful, really insightful. I reached out to you earlier. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, I remember.
I managed to find the link to your talk, which is good. So yeah, just as a background. Hello. Who's that?
This is my boss.
She's adorable.
Yeah, you can ask your question.
Yeah, no. So just as a background, I've lived, studied, and worked a bit in Taiwan previously, in Taipei. I completely agree with you. It's a fantastic place to be. I mean, I would live there if I could. So I'm currently based in Hong Kong. I'm in a senior marketing role at a UK based company, but in Hong Kong. So I'm the head of marketing for APAC here. So you touched on a few points about C-suite jobs in Taiwan. Usually hire more foreigners relatively.
Yeah.
So what are then the opportunities of making that switch from here to there, and also how does the pay compare in Taiwan versus say Singapore and Hong Kong?
Yeah, I mean the problem with the C-suite jobs is that they're sent here. Those are not really jobs that you can apply for. So for example, I know you worked for Colliers, right, before. So as an example, if Colliers were to say to you, we want to send you to the Taiwan market, that's where you get the big bucks, right? That's where you get the kind of the high salary, the housing allowance, all that kind of stuff paid for. In general, I think the Taiwan salary market is probably about half of Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai. Yeah. And in the C-level jobs, it gets even more out of control. Like the really senior Singapore jobs will be 5 times what you can make in Taiwan. Yeah. Yeah.
Which sort of reflects the cost of living
it does. But it's also a market thing. I mean, there's hardly any regional Asia, like you're working ahead, kind of marketing, APAC head. Almost none of those roles are based here. They're based in Hong Kong and Shanghai and Tokyo, and most of them Singapore. Singapore is the regional hub of Asia, and Singapore's dominating, especially because of Hong Kong's recent troubles. I don't think we need to go into detail, but yeah. Laurie.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I would move back to Taiwan, Taipei, is because I genuinely love it there. You said everything. The people are nice. It's such an open and accepting community. So yeah, well,
it is. Yeah, it's a great place to live. Really great place to live.
Because we're hearing a lot about migration from Hong Kong to Taiwan. It's been a real kind of hot topic over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
So I was kind of curious about whether you'd actually come across many such cases.
I have.
What kind of sectors you're seeing that kind of Hong Kong kind of talent moving over to Taiwan? Is it particular sectors?
No, it's a big mix. It's a big mix. I mean, most of them are solid professionals like Maybelline who just spoke. They have good CVs, good CVs. They work for big multinational companies and good roles, and they have chosen to leave Hong Kong for whatever reason and settle in Taiwan. I mean, if you are from Hong Kong, moving to Taipei it's a good option, It's not too different. A lot of Hong Kongese also are pretty strong in their Mandarin. Yeah, it's a good option. It's a good option, I think. And also, this talk is called, the job market for foreign talent in Taiwan. It is different depending on what type of foreigner you are. Like, for example, the kind of white British male like me, it would be a certain amount of difficulty, whereas let's say if you are Malaysian Chinese, it's going to be a bit easier because you're seen as culturally closer and also language reasons. So let's say for somebody from Hong Kong, again, it's going to be easier than it is than somebody from Croatia or Italy. There's kind of different levels. And, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but there's still a bit of racism in Taiwan against, let's say Africans, Indians, Southeast Asians. It's still there for sure. So the kind of the Taiwanese tier list of like how difficult it's going to be for you to find a specific job, unfortunately, is still a reality.
And I just had one last question that was kind of concerning what you do in your own post, because one of the things that was you talked about was that the vast majority of your customers are actually Taiwanese that you're dealing with. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about what kind of background of Taiwanese come to you. So just a kind of a question I was kind of curious about.
Yeah, I mean, almost all of my candidates are Taiwanese. I mean, 95% probably. And these are people who, you would recognize from SOAS. They're Taiwanese, but they probably studied overseas at some point, if not lived overseas. They're still very much Taiwanese, but they're a bit more westernized. They're confident, well-spoken in both English and Chinese. Successful people. I mean, you can imagine the sales director of L'Oreal and the marketing head of Coca-Cola in Taiwan. You can imagine what type of person these are. These are smart, confident, and actually Taiwan is, especially in my industries, is dominated by the women. Like the kind of the gender balance argument that exists in other places is not as relevant here because the women are absolutely smashing the men in terms of C-suite jobs. Yeah, like in marketing, finance, McKinsey consulting type stuff, the women are doing really, really well in the market here. A lot of general managers and managing directors here are female. And there's absolutely no difference in salary between men and women here. Yeah, I mean, obviously I can only talk about from personal experience, but I have access to a lot of data. And from the data that I have seen, there's absolutely no difference between men and women in terms of salary. I say a lot of the women earn the men that I know.
Interesting. Even in the kind of the companies that you're kind of
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, in most examples that I know, the women out earn their husbands. The wives out earn their husbands. When I know both people, let's say they both work in marketing, the woman is often better paid than her husband. I don't tell them that, but it's true. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're going to have to bring things to a close because we start 5 minutes past and end 5 minutes to the hour, partly so students can kind of move across to their next class within the campus. Or at the moment, we're kind of doing such a strange mix. I've got in-person class in the morning and then online class in the afternoon. So if we could kind of turn on your mics and let's give Alan a big SOAS round of applause, or do the clap function. Thanks a lot, Alan. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone.
Of course, we will be doing continuing our discussion at 5 o'clock when we have the an in-person, I think also online session on scholarships to study and research in Taiwan. And there's clearly some links there, particularly the point about maybe studying first and then moving into working in Taiwan. So thanks, Alan, for so many kind of practical tips, and hope you have a great Chinese New Year, even though it sounds like it's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, Xin Nian Kuai Le, everyone. Xin Nian Kuai Le. Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Oh, go ahead, Bea, you want to say something?
Before you go, can I ask all the audience also turn on their camera so we can have a group?
We can have a group photograph.
Oh, group photo, fantastic. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone fix their hair.
And can I also ask how you just let us know when you are ready?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm just trying to maximize the screen.
Thank you very much. And I also do the same.
Mm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks,
cheers, everyone.
See you then.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Have a good holiday. Bye.
Bye.
Oh. Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.